Hello, everyone. My name is Andrea Hiott, and these conversations are part of my research for a PhD I'm writing. I went back to school because I have an idea about cognition as being movement across species and scales. And there's a lot of science now that supports this, even though that might sound crazy. I'm not saying that cognition and walking and driving cars and motorcycles are the same thing. Not at all. I'm saying it's all one continuous process, and that the ways we move through the world pattern the ways we eventually also come to notice our own thoughts and patterns of thought and language and the way that we communicate. And I guess what I'm trying to do, which is why this is called Beyond Dichotomies, is think about this more as continuous without beginnings and ends, non-linear. And it's very hard for us to not think of things as linear and with beginnings and ends. And in the same way we think of our bodies, that we have a definite self that begins and ends, but in fact, we are all many different selves according to what situation we're in. We're also come into the world as many different cells, which there's a lot of science now which talks about the cell, C-E-L-L, as a kind of self. But of course, all of this depends on how you are defining all these different categories, and that's very messy. And that's why I just want to talk to all these smart, delightful human beings who are doing such great work in so many different fields relative to movement, what moves us. And I mean this on all levels. That's part of this whole project, is trying to understand, we move in the physical world, but we also move in the mental world. We move in the virtual world a lot these days, emotional world. All of these for me are landscapes that we are constantly making paths through and moving through. And for me, that movement is what eventually becomes what we think of as thought and mind. It's not distinct from it. There's not mental and physical. Instead, there's this ongoing movement and many different scales and layers by which we understand that movement. And I think us and our notion of self is likewise one way we're trying to understand something that's much wider than us. Ecological is the word I use. That actually all these different selves and species and ways of movement are co-creating one another with different proximity and to different degree, of course. But I do think we've reached a moment where we can begin to understand ourselves through a little bit different orientation, what I call the ecological orientation, which means we begin to see that even though we are very distinct individuals, there is no one like you in the world, or like me, or like anyone else. In terms of space and time, we have tread a unique path from the time you were born till now. Every move you've made is one continuous path or trajectory. Just imagine you look at it from above. And that's in real space, like literally where you've walked, where you've crawled, where you've swam, where you've driven, where you've been driven. That's all one tangled, beautiful path, and no one else has it. It's only yours. And so sharing that perspective is incredibly crucial. But why is it crucial? It's crucial because that path is part of a wider ecological path. And all these tangled paths that we're leading together, if we can zoom out a bit, began to look also like its own body and its own form of movement. And that's very important, that we can try to start to understand ourselves in that way, that yes, we are very distinct individual selves, but just in the same way that the cells of our body are part of us, we are part of something larger. And how we move is also influencing how it moves. So we can begin to think of what we now call cognition, but is really the way we make our way through the world. We can begin to think of that as a process that's happening at many different scales and levels, but that all of our movement in all of these scales and in all of these landscapes, physical, mental, emotional, all across the species, all across these many, many different beautiful life forms, from a tree to the planet itself. All of this can be understood as waymaking. And there's something really exhilarating about beginning to understand that we're part of that and that we can contribute to it in a positive way and even maybe create some new paths. Of course, it can also go the opposite way. That's part of what we're trying to figure out. How do we move? How do we continue to move ourselves? How do we continue to move ourselves and one another, and at the same time become more aware of other people's paths and other species' paths, and try to find a way forward that looks at all these different scales as one common movement, but also not just as one thing. There's no beginning or end. It's dynamic. It's never static. We take measurements to understand it, but as soon as we take that measurement, it's changed. So this is really an attempt to reorient a lot of assumptions we take for granted in life through how we move and what moves us. So that's why I have all these discussions about love and philosophy with scientists and philosophers and artists. And it's also why I love to think about technology and planes and cars and bicycles and motorcycles and walking and hiking and swimming and crawling and all these ways that we humans and non-humans move through the world. All of this for me is a continuous process, and I'm trying to make connections between that and my philosophy, and this is just my way of researching that. I don't know anything about social media. I've never been on social media. I'm a nerd in the most kind of old school sense. So I apologize for that. It might be a little awkward. I don't know how to do all that stuff. And frankly, I don't know how to spend time trying. So I'm grateful if anyone wants to help. But the focus here is mostly just trying to understand how we move and what moves us and how that can connect us better, and maybe how we can begin to orient ecologically and open up to completely new sensory experiences, sensations of self, and connections and practical ways to create new technology, medicine, whatever we need to heal. I want to expand what we've thought is possible till now. And there's so many people already doing that. So I just want to talk to them here and see what patterns I can find. So thanks for being here, and let's go.